the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Seeing only distinguished invited guests here, we'll skip public comment and move right into board comments and community updates. Any community updates? Anyone want
Oh,
to
I
share?
do. So we met today in the Health Benefits Committee. We've wrapped up all 3 presentations from the 3 insurance companies. And now we just have to piece everything together and pick some, recommend some plans. And so that we have 2 more meetings. And that's it.
Great, thank you.
So real quick, the Budget Committee had its reformation meeting. They're actually trying to start very early looking at a calendar, but the state hasn't actually set the date of Election Day for next year yet. So, I mean, in general, it'll be the 2nd Tuesday, but hopefully, I think by the next time we meet, that'll be reasonably set in stone. So we'll be able to start working backwards from that.
Great, thank you. And next up we have, normally we would have the student rep report. However, the student rep is currently playing baseball, so pitch hitting for him is Principal Corman. Thank you very much.
We'll do my best Sean impersonation. Yeah, that was nice.
Took me a while.
Just some quick items on our agenda for the next 2 weeks before your next board meeting. We are about to venture in on Monday to AP testing season, which runs about 2 weeks. So we'll be testing every possible AP test over the next 2 weeks. College Board sets a schedule. They say this test is on Tuesday at noon, and everybody nationwide takes it Tuesday at noon. Jody Callahan has done a ton of work with folks over at City Hall to occupy some space over there, so it doesn't disrupt our normal operation here, which is great. Patty's going to talk about it in a minute, but we do our final round of SAS testing for our middle school friends on Monday and Tuesday, which is very exciting, then they're done. Newmarket Cares Day is tomorrow. We have about 100 students venturing out into the community, doing various community service activities, beautifying the greater Newmarket area, which we're really excited about. We also have some folks who were a bit tardy on their permission slips who will be beautifying the inside of the building for us tomorrow, which will be very exciting. Also, highlight of my week tomorrow night from 6 to 8 in this very space will be our first middle school dance in a very long time. Very excited about that. Wellness Day is next Friday. Caitlin, Skina, and Namina Nieves have done yeoman's work creating that. We've got over 22 different activities all day next Friday, ranging from canine demonstration to pickleball to basketball to turtle coming. It's always a great day. Last year, as a first-time experience, it was a little overwhelmed, but kids absolutely love it. They're essentially signed up for 3 different sessions, and they spend the day intermingled at different grade levels and different groups, exploring different social and emotional activities. Next week, as a plug, is Teacher Appreciation Week nationally. May 6th through 10th is Teacher Appreciation Week. High school prom is in 2 Fridays, because you're getting the theme of my Fridays in the month of May here. May 17th, locally here at the Rock, will be the prom. In this space at 5 o'clock will be the Grand March. And our next half day, which is Wednesday the 15th, after the end of school, before the PD starts, we'll have our annual Pride Picnic, which Nicole St. James is taking point on, and will be, weather's good, will likely be taking place out front. Hopefully we have some benches up by then, but that's what I got so far. That's my best Sean impersonation. It's not great, but we'll go with that.
Fantastic, thank you so much. Any
Thank you.
comments, questions? No? All right, we'll move right into the superintendent report.
And actually, I'm going to be extremely short because you're going to hear from me a lot during this meeting. So the last thing I need to do is make it long. And you'll hear about it in a minute, but I'm very excited about our U.S. News and World Report ranking in the top 10 high schools in New Hampshire. I think that's a really exciting thing, which in a few minutes, Andy and Patty will tell you about. Beyond that, like I said, you'll hear from me more in the meeting. So I'll stop there.
All right, well, that was short. We'll head right into presentations then. We have a memo for bond funds and the use of impact fees that Jen Mellon is going to present for us.
Hi there, everybody. As you know, we presented the quarterly financials at your last meeting, and there were a couple of dangling participles where we said we didn't need a decision from you last week, but we were hoping the board would take them up, so hence we're back on the agenda. Much of what's in the memo came directly from the financial statements. There's nothing really new here, but what we are hoping the board will do, well, actually on the impact fees, I do have some research for you, but starting with the bond proceeds, the issues that we have is we have a principal balance of $205,712 roughly that is in the account that can be used for a variety of purposes. So we had laid out those purposes for you. They can be used to complete a portion of the originally voted project. You can use those bond funds to pay down debt service, or you can use them to reimburse the district for, to develop a warrant article to say, to put them on in front of the voters to say we'd like to use an alternative purpose. So all of the options are kind of laid out here for you, and what we're hoping that you would do is last week, a couple weeks ago, Dave presented a plan for the courtyard renovation, and one of the purposes for that would be would be this purpose. That said, there's other mechanisms to fund that. You could use impact fees or different things, but we're hoping that the board will come to a couple of decisions tonight. First, let us know that we can proceed with the courtyard. To tell us what funding you would like us to use for that purpose. Tell us what you would like us to do with the remaining bond funds after that's completed. And then finally, I have done some research as requested on the impact fees. I reached out to Bill Tappan at the town. He was fantastic. He actually sent me a copy of the Newmarket town resolution that explains all of the impact fees. The link to that document is here in this memo for you. But basically, the impact fees that we gather, there are certain purposes we can use. One of those would be to pay down debt service. So I'm just putting it out there. We don't have to necessarily make a decision about the impact fees tonight. They're not going to, we don't have any that are expiring, but I did want to offer that to the board as an option, because if you were to use those in 24, 25 to offset some of your bond payment, it would end next year giving back a little bit more to offset tax rate. So it's an option for you, because we budget for the full bond amount. If we don't expend that full bond amount and use impacts fees instead to cover part of that, there would be a resulting balance at the end of 24, 25. So,
Can I just interrupt? I'm having a little hard time hearing you. I don't know why, but like when you turn your head, I can't,
you want,
and I'm just going deaf in my old age.
is that any better? No?
I think,
It's on, I can hear it.
okay. Thank you, Gianna. I think it just, yeah.
I'll talk.
Because if
I'll
I
talk
can't really,
louder.
I mean,
How's
I
it?
can hear you, but not everything.
There's background noise.
So I'm just thinking the public probably can't hear you either.
So that's basically what we were coming back to the board for. We work at the pleasure of the board. We will use we have a good problem that we have these two buckets of funding, but we really are looking for some guidance from the board about how you would like us to handle that and to the disposition of those funds.
So if I could just jump in real quick. So going back to the courtyard project, remember the last meeting, we talked about approximately a $23,500 cost, and we talked about whether or not to use remaining bond funds for that, because that would be eligible for it. But the question from the board came up about whether impact fees could be used for that. The answer to that is yes. Well, impact fees can be used for that. So one thing we're asking you tonight is, would you like us to go forward with the courtyard project, potentially using impact fees to pay that if that's what you'd like to do? The secondary question is really that on fund. I mean, certainly it can be used for the courtyard as well, but you expressed at the last meeting some interest in using it more towards tax relief. So the answer is yes, that can be done in next year's budget cycle, either by paying down the bond or however it's decided to be.
We've already paid our bond for this cycle, so it wouldn't be something that would impact our June 30th balance. It would be something to look at for next year.
So, I just want to be super clear.
Yep.
So if we used payment, or would that be paying down the principal?
It would be using that to make the bond payment,
So-
but the resulting amount, because we've earmarked the full amount in the budget,
Yeah.
it would result in that amount being left over at the end to return to taxpayers to offset.
Okay. We're creating spikes. I like we're doing that, but like it's good for the taxpayers. Good for the taxpayers, but not for planning, right? Not on you, but for them planning on the budget. And if we use the impact fees for it, basically it would be the same exact purpose. So it's really,
Or,
we've got two buckets of money, two
Well,
things to spend for.
And we also have to remember that the amount of the bond for the courtyard wouldn't be the whole amount, wouldn't be 205,000, it'd be 25,000-ish.
Yeah. Or if it came from impact fees, it wouldn't be the whole
Well,
270.
270.
right. And you don't have to fully expend the impact fees either. You could,
Right.
presumably we will continue to grow them, but you could use it as a strategy, a mitigating strategy of a small portion of them every year if you wanted to do that. Or, there's a lot of different ways you can go with the impact fees.
It does feel like we need a strategy for how we want to leverage impact fees, because like I also think they can't go to, correct me if I'm wrong, you just go for, like, they can't be used for capital improvement, like improvements to existing things, but if we were to do any sort of like expansion project, not just for expansion of seats, looking at enrollment, but like other ideas that might be in the capital, like actual like capital project, like that could be used for certain capital projects, correct?
Well, I kind of listed him out here, but you can, this is what it says directly in the charter. For the purposes of acquiring, constructing, expanding, equipping, or improving public capital facilities to increase their capacity or to recoup the costs of such capacity improvements. So that's, it has to be kind of an expansion-y type of project. Like I gave my example last time, if you were to increase the parking situation,
Right.
that would definitely fit like this purpose, right?
Or something with fields
Or something with fields, right, that would definitely fit in there. The other purpose, though, is actually a recoup of costs that you previously spent, right? So you think of the $39 million bond,
Yeah.
we could literally take that to recoup the costs in any period you wish to recoup the cost of the bonds. That could be your strategy, right? That as those things come in, you take a certain bucket of those or a certain percentage and you use it each year, Just be careful that I don't know how, we don't have a really good historical picture of how those impact fees come in, because if you remember a couple of years ago, they were pegged at about $70,000 for a very long period of time, and all of a sudden they've started to grow. So clearly some projects have come to the conclusion and they're starting to collect, but I don't know if we can project that into the future. So if you're using it as a strategy a year in advance, you need to make sure that you never get to the bottom of your impact fees, because we don't know what's in front of us as far as those go.
Gianna, can I ask you, on the courtroom, I understand we have to do something to fix it up, but I have a concern that the price, I think Dave gave us like close to, what, 25,000?
Yeah.
Is that based on, I can't remember, did he get a
Quote?
quote? Thank you.
Yes, he did. He actually, if you recall, you voted on a new landscaping
That's right, okay.
RFP. That person, the group that's doing that actually came in, looked at it, helped him draw them out, looked at the drainage, looked at the different things. They've actually gone out and priced the materials. We do have a hard quote for what
Okay.
that would be. The only part I would caution the board is that we don't necessarily know all of what's underneath. So
Yeah.
if we start digging and we find an unanticipated large rock or something that we have to modify our plan, we would have to adapt for that. But based on the materials and to lay it out the way Dave explained it, we do have a pretty good quote. He's gotten quote on the outdoor picnic tables too.
Yeah, right, okay. I don't know, we haven't had much luck in that department, the courtroom,
I know.
so I'm just worried about what are we going to open here and find.
Well, I
Well-
think one of the advantages to the proposal, as Dave presented it 2 weeks ago, is that it involves very minimal
Right.
adaptation to the environment. You're really talking about just building it up to create some flat spaces. You're not talking about digging down and going. So
necessarily.
I think he was actually basically saying you dig half, right?
Yeah.
You dig half and use the other half to fill it in, so. yeah.
Right. And then put some
But
type
I
of
can't
service.
imagine there's going to be a rock 6 inches down that a huge boulder that we don't know about.
Yeah.
Could be surprising.
So, and because the other thing is, remember, we're not using a huge percentage of the courtyard in his design, right? So if we did encounter a boulder, we could maybe shift or move or redesign, because we're not using the entire space out there. So we're pretty optimistic we can come in pretty close to where he said, but I just encourage the board, like, just, you know how it is when you tear into a wall in your house, sometimes stuff happens, and you come across stuff you weren't expecting.
Well, my thought on this for consideration, I guess. I mean, we've only got the 7,156, that first piece of the impact fee that expires anywhere near in time. You know, you take that and a piece of the 48,000 to do the courtyard, the excess bond funds, you know, I think to, you know, get partially offset the bond payment for a year. It feels consistent to me because it's work that we borrowed money to do and then we decided not to do the work. So consequently, just, I mean,
I was hoping it could go
wish
to the
there was a way,
principal,
yeah, I wish there was a way you could pay down principal and redo the amortization schedule, but apparently that's not allowed, so.
Yeah, more like using the impact fees to pay bond is like choosing to buy it down some. What we would be doing if we just said, hey, we're not doing any work with this anymore, I'll send it back. It was very much like, we didn't use everything we said we needed to borrow on the taxpayer's dime, your taxpayer, just turn it back.
So do the impact fees have to be, not the impact fees, sorry, the remaining bond principal need to be expended this year?
Can you say that again?
The-
I'm having trouble hearing you.
Yeah, I'm sorry, the bond principal, we have remaining 205,000?
Yep.
Does that all have to be expended this year?
Technically, no, but there are statutes that regard how long you can hold on to money
it
that
would
you
cost
use
additional
for
money
debt.
if we-
And we got a little grace period because of COVID. We have been following IRS guidance, which requires that we do a statement of non-arbitrage every year, which at the cost of $400 a year, to prove that we're not making $1 million off of the 200 we have left. So we're in compliance, but at some point that is intended, the statute really says you will
Yeah.
return it.
The reason I asked is the peaks and valleys Phil was talking about.
Yeah.
My thought was maybe we use half of it this year. Now, granted, you're talking about a penny on the tax rate, so it's not much of a peak or valley, so maybe it's a moot discussion.
Keep in mind, though, I think we may be looking at next year, not this year, because if we disband the bond fund, we want to do so after the courtyard's done, so we know what we have, if you're using it for that, right? And so I think it's more feasible that we would disband the bond fund in 24, 25 than to try and do it in this period of time.
I mean, my thought was a little different. I thought, the whole residual bond fund, let's just apply that against the first bond payment that we have not made yet.
Which in essence would go to the taxpayers.
Yeah, which goes to the taxpayers in essence. You know, the courtyard, whether that ends up being 25,000 or 23,000 or 27,000, whatever the number is, you do that against the first two tranches of the impact fees.
Yep.
And then we can be more strategic about the rest of the impact fees that we have left.
May I make one recommendation to change first bond payment to second bond payment? Because the first bond payment is due like right out of the gate in July. Second one's due in December. That would still give you plenty of time to evaluate that, and it would give us a chance to work some of the machinations of closing out that account. And
I mean, from a tax rate year
Doesn't
standpoint,
matter.
it doesn't matter. So
Right.
yes, whatever works best for logistically.
Thank you. Any other questions on that? All right, next up,
Thanks.
thank you very much. Next up, we'll head right into student achievement data. Patty Wands.
Hi, everyone. As you can see in the printout that you have of this data presentation, there are a lot of numbers. It's a lot of data. And we could talk about this for hours and hours and hours. So tonight's presentation is really an overview of this data. And then also knowing that there's going to be another opportunity, Todd and I talked about this, because we really could go down a rabbit hole. And I could talk about data all day. So anyway, so my role here is to kind of keep it of that broad overview. So the very first slide that you see is really just our schedule for assessing. And you're going to see that in grades K-5, we are administering the iReady assessment, and in NEWA for grades, for mathematics for 1 through 8, really. The reason for iReady is due to the pilot, the literacy pilot, because one of the programs they piloted is magnetic reading, that's too close, okay. So that's the reason for that. So a decision will be made at the end of the year regarding the diagnostic. I could just say the teachers love love iReady assessment, diagnostic. And just a little, because I know, Lonnie, that you're newer here on the board, and I've been talking about the literacy pilot this whole year. And I want to explain to you, because the way this data is, it is different setup than the NWEA data. And the iReady, just as a reminder, it's an adaptive test. So it matches the difficulty of test questions to the proficiency level for each student. So what that means is the student answers the question correctly or incorrectly, the test will adjust up or down with questions of varying difficulty until the diagnostic reaches the level of difficulty that's right for each student. So it's typical as students would answer about 50 questions correct and 50 questions wrong, so that we can determine that proficiency level of where students are. The iReady assessment is also criterion referenced, and what that means is students are given questions against the grade level standard. So when they receive the results, it's all to the grade level because it's the standards that are aligned in each grade level. So the most exciting thing for this is, of course, you're not going to have kindergarten or first grade show scores that are 3 or more grade levels below, because kindergarten is their first experience in school. But for example, if you look at kindergarten in the fall, when they administered this assessment in reading, 75% of the students were a grade level below, meaning like pre-K. In the winter, what we saw, that number went to only 29% of the students. And as you move to the right, what you want to see is the numbers in the green get larger. So to have 6% of kindergartners mid or above grade level in the fall to 32% is so exciting. And I can tell you this week, the elementary school has been administering the spring iReady data, and it's just so exciting, the data that we're seeing in the growth that our students are making. Right now, K, 1, 2, 3, and most of 4 have taken it. So by the end of next week, all the students will have taken it. So that's why I want to come back to you with the elementary screen, with the elementary data. But just looking at this alone, like look at grade 2. Exciting to have 18% of the kids mid or above grade level to shoot to 51, half the percentage of the kids. So you might be asking yourself, Patty, why is this looking so great? We're not going to say that, oh, it's great because we're piloting. You know, we can't say that. But Sean Pine, the principal, has made some very distinct changes in the school schedule this year. How we're delivering and structuring our interventions of students in Tier 2 and Tier 3. And also what's changed is because of the literacy pilot, the structure of how literacy is taught grades K-5. So when you put all those little changes together, you're going to see some shifts and some changes. And the teachers are really excited about it. And actually, the kids actually like taking this assessment because it has built in what they call brain breaks. And so it knows how we tell the kids how hard you're working so hard that you're going to be rewarded with this break. Where the NWEA assessment does not have that for math, and the kids say out loud to the teachers how much that they don't appreciate that.
I know we had a lot of, sorry for interrupting.
Yeah.
I know we had a lot of teachers embrace doing this pilot.
Yes.
Did we have any who didn't? I'm just wondering how
Two.
if we can kind of figure out whether the other changes, how much of an effect the other changes in the school environment had
For next year, for the pilot, if you're asking number of teachers.
on the overall results that we're seeing.
Every student, regardless of the teachers in the pilot, every student has been taking this, or every teacher has been administering the iReady diagnostic.
So have we looked at the changes in students who did not pilot, who
Yes,
did?
I have.
Is that on the next page and I should have shut up and waited?
I don't want to
'Cause that's
publicize
fair.
that because I feel
Because it's
that
only two.
only
Yeah.
two
it would
teachers
fair
are
enough.
not
it'd be a
taking
little-
place
Okay.
in the pilot,
Yep.
so out of fairness of
Sure.
protecting people, but yes, we
Okay.
have looked at that. Okay, so here's your NWEA data. And again, this is the math, and you're going to say, well, why isn't kindergarten there? Kindergarten, they will take it in the spring, and that's really been the process, or I should say the routine for our kindergarten students. However, if we move to the iReady diagnostic, it would be for reading and mathematics next year, and I can see our kindergartners. Maybe we would not do it in the fall, but the winter and the spring anyway, to see growth data, which is why you do these benchmarks, to see growth data. So again, grade 3, seeing some nice growth there, and certainly grade 5, seeing some growth as well in mathematics for fall, winter. The elementary school will be taking their NEWA Math Spring assessment late May. So another reason why I'll be coming back. So the next one we want, and the NWEA is also an adaptive test too. Okay, so now we're going to move to the middle school. The middle school has already taken, the middle school does NWEA for reading and mathematics, and they have already taken their spring assessment, so I'm able to have this data for you. The English Language Arts Department, I actually met with the English Language Arts Department coordinator, Amy Beth Taylor, who will be leading the department's early release work, and data is the focus. And I feel like one of our goals for next school year is really using data more to inform our instruction, or tying data into instruction. And data doesn't always have to be formal data like benchmark data, but classroom data, anecdotal data. How do we use that data to inform our instruction? So what the middle school and high school teachers are all going to meet together, and they will be each receiving packets of really drilled down, I can drill down into the NWE data for vocabulary, literature, and informational text by classes, and so that all the teachers can really dig down, and we're going to use a data protocol of like a kind of a notice and wonder protocol, because sometimes when we look at data, you want to be careful not to personalize it, but instead, what does the data tell us? Not about personal stories, but just overall. And then how do we tie that back to the standards? How do we tie that into our UBD units? And so it always provides us lots of opportunity for discussion and work and going forward. And then for mathematics, I want to explain 8th grade, because you're going to look at 8th grade and say, well, what is happening? Because we do see some nice gains. 6th grade showed some nice gains this year. 7th grade, hanging steady at 50%. Again, that's above the 61st percentile. But 8th grade, there are 17 students who are not included in this 8th grade data because they're in algebra. So the algebra students who are in the 8th grade take the algebra assessment for NWEA. And that's fairly new practice this year. Before, the algebra students took the NWEA data, the 6+ assessment, just like the other kids. And really, we want our 8th grade algebra students taking an algebra assessment. So this is the first year where that has changed. So as a result, the numbers are different. So you have 50 or 57 students in the spring who took it. And what this data tells me too is what work and going forward is, what practices are we doing to move our students who are above the 61st percentile? Now we talk about enrichment. So what are we doing, and how can we more support teachers in professional development and training to help move our students?
So, let me say this back to you and see if you agree with me. For 8th grade, essentially, we've clipped the ones who are farthest along and put them in a different assessment. So, of course, the numbers look different from the 2 lower grades.
Say that, just the
So
last part.
the 17 students who
Yes,
are farthest
they're on
along
the
in
next
math
page.
are in a different assessment. So,
Yeah.
okay.
Exactly, yeah, they're in a different assessment. So before, they used to all algebra and grade 8, they were all taking the same assessment. But it's really not appropriate, because your algebra students should be taking algebra assessments, because it's assessing what they know and what they don't know for the algebra standards. So that's what this slide is. But as 88% of our algebra students above the 61st percentile is wonderful, but it gives me a little bit of a pause when I see 94% of them were above the 61st, and then went back to 88. I mean, it's still wonderful and good, but it just, as the educator in me is like, oh, you know, what more can we do to keep that 94% steady, or, you know what I mean, or go up to 98, or whatnot. And again, that's that enrichment piece. So sometimes I'm as 8th graders who are in algebra are strong students, right, mathematically, but that doesn't mean we can't push them and enrich them further. Not a productive struggle. It's like, was what I like to call it, not to tears, but productively. So.
The other thing I see here, this distribution for the algebra test is so skinny on the high end of the scale. It feels like maybe we're not suggesting algebra to enough of the kids in 8th grade.
I think that's
Such a great
absolutely,
point.
that
That's
is
what Todd-
absolutely true.
Look at,
We
this
want more than
distribution
17
is
students
like,
in algebra. Yeah.
it's,
Yeah,
That's our goal.
Yeah, we can certainly talk, it's one of those topics
Yes.
that I think is definitely worthy of discussion
Yes.
at some point. But we have historically directed our best math students into what is considered a higher level at the end of 5th grade, so that we've had an accelerated model. Well, what that does is at age 10, we're
identifying
making the
students at 10.
decision as to who is going to have the cognitive ability to master algebra at age 13. And it is,
It's not.
that's an absolutely true point. And we have made some adjustments
Yeah.
to the way we're doing it, 5th, 6th, and 7th.
Giving more
in hopes that
opportunities.
the idea is you want all kids
Right.
to have the opportunity to master algebra, and ideally, we'd have 74 kids in 8th grade algebra as
Yeah.
opposed to 17.
Well, really, and it's raising the expectation and having higher expectations for our students that they can do more, to get even more and more, to raise that number for algebra, absolutely. So now the next 2 slides I have are a little bit of a historical data from Newmarket compared to the state of New Hampshire. And so it starts in 2019. This is for reading assessment, our New Hampshire SAS that we take in May. And with this, you have to be mindful that 2020 is missing, and that's because that was the pandemic, and we did not administer the assessment that year. So you have to skip. So for grade 3, the 46% proficient in 2019, go to 2021 and they're 5th graders. So if you look at the 5th grade, they went from 46 to 58. So you saw some gain there as well. But we do see, and this is, for Todd and I, our 2nd year here, and Andy too, we see a little bit of a pattern when our students come to 6th grade and when we look at data, and that we see a decline. And so we're asking ourselves those questions. Yes, there's a transition from 5th to 6th grade, but what more can we do to ease that and look at programming and have more vertical discussion with 5th and 6th grade teachers as well? And then you'll notice that in some of these years, Newmarket outperforms the state, and some years the state outperforms Newmarket. Any questions?
that's rough. The change when you go from 5th to 6th with each one of these cohorts. Yikes.
Yeah.
But you also don't see, I'm going cohort 6, 7, 8. Like you go 21, 22, 23, I'm seeing massive gains. 35%,
Yeah,
37%.
There's a rebound. So what is it about 6th grade that's causing everything?
Where's the rebound?
So if you take like the group that's in 3rd grade in 21, or sorry, that's the wrong way to look at it, I'm sorry. So you take the group that was in 5th grade in, you got to skip
I was
2.
on math, sorry. I was on math.
Oh, sorry. If you start with 21, there's a group 58% in 5th grade, that goes to 49% in 6th grade, then bounces back to 59, in 7th grade.
But is that 2 kids leaving and 2 other kids coming back?
Right,
Or-
because the numbers are small too,
But
yeah.
if you compare it to math, it's actually pretty consistent.
So I'll go to math. The next
Right,
page
like
is
you see
math.
it, There's no, there doesn't seem to be that drop. Like, look, 6, 7, well, I guess skipping 20 is hard.
There
Yeah.
was a good gain from 22 to 20 last year, to go
Yeah.
from 19% proficient to 30%. That's a
That's big.
great, it's a good number.
But then you go 5th to 6th,
But also like from 39 to 19.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Ugh.
25 to 19.
there's like a,
Yeah.
I think it's
Thank
important to look at trends, right? Obviously,
Yeah.
it's like I'm sorry,
No, go ahead.
2/3, right? In the course, 2/3 proficient. Like, that's concerning to me, that we're in a place, it's not like
Yeah.
being like accusatory or anything
Yeah,
like that,
yeah.
but like, there's work to be done.
There's work to be done, absolutely. Yeah, you would agree.
Yep.
And so then I had shared with you following a cohort of students, these are our current 8th graders. So I went back to, well, where were they in 3rd grade? And so this is the reading slide. So, and how NEWA reported out, this is when we had Performance Plus, and so the data is a little wonky for NWEA because they would report out percent proficient, so they took the 50th percentile and above. Some people would argue 50th percentile doesn't necessarily mean proficient because that means like 50% of the standards, right? Or had they mastered at that level. So anyway, but we have that data there. You can see 21, 22, there was no data for NWEA. We go back from now in grade 7, we don't have Performance Plus anywhere. So what we know with NWEA, how they report their data, we can look at a cohort of students scoring at the 61st percentile and above. So that's why it's not apples to apples here. So in grade 7 last year, 44% of the kids scored 61st percentile and better. And this year, this same cohort in grade 8 scored 49%. So we are seeing the trajectory go up, which is what we want to see. And if we look at the New Hampshire SAS, from 6th grade at 49%, last year they scored at 59% proficient. So we're really hopeful this year when they take the SAS in the next week or two that our students will see growth there for this cohort. This is our 8th grade. So that's reading and then math. Yes.
So we're looking at a cohort, and we're looking at between years for just grades, and we're looking at us compared to the state. I feel like there's a better comparison we should be using to identify how we're really doing relative to similar schools.
Yep, so, and what I would like to do
Is that on the
when I
next page
have all the
again?
data, because that's what the SAS does. The SAS what I can do when the SAS data is released, when everyone's done, so this would really be the summertime, I can pull the towns, I can pull like 6, 7 towns with Newmarket and share that data. That's why I need to come back and we can really have more discussions. So this is like within the school data that I can share with you how we're assessing students.
But it is worth noting that all the iReady, right?
iReady
and NEWA
NEWA.
are normed against national norms.
Yes,
So
they're
So it is
national.
comparing against the standard, so they're real numbers compared to all kids of that
Across
age,
the country.
that content area across the country.
Yeah, but we can get local data as well
Right.
on schools in our area and how they're performing.
Can I ask why 2019, 2020, when this group was in grade 4, why the count was so low?
I asked that question too, and some teachers administered it and some classrooms didn't.
Okay.
Oh, this is the kind of students who actually took it. Okay.
Grade 4 in 1920, and that's January data, so technically before the pandemic.
Yeah.
It wasn't the entire grade level that took that data. That's the data that I
That's all
have.
we can say.
Yeah, I don't have an answer
There's
for you
been no
there.
good explanation.
Yep,
Okay.
yeah,
Grade 4.
yeah.
And I think, I just want to go back to the
State.
the comparison to the state,
Yeah,
and maybe this is the teacher and me being defensive. There's something to be said, I think, when you see that the lowest percentages, like I'm just looking at 2023 math, are almost consistent in terms of state and school. And the test,
well, the year 2022. So let's talk about the year 2022. We were still working with not completely full enrollments. There was still some students learning from home, some in school. So, and it was kids coming, okay, 19, that was really 2021. 2021, that year, I think was a difficult year statewide coming out of the pandemic. 2022 could be looked at. We're kind of getting into normalcy in terms of students, in school. But again, we are also recognizing loss of teaching and learning from the pandemic, and it's not going to correct itself overnight. So I think we see the trajectory getting better in terms of that. Is that what you mean?
I also think that by grade level, the test is different for children, and I'm not saying it's the test's fault, but like perhaps it was the third grade test was a little bit more developmentally appropriate for third graders than, I don't think it's just that everybody in New Hampshire and Newmarket who teaches fifth grade, didn't do a great job at teaching math that year. I think that perhaps there were, I don't know, there's something to be said that when you see that the state and schools overall are pretty
the same.
similar in their percentages, that it's likely that the test did have an impact.
What
Yeah.
I would love
The low
to see,
percentages.
and I may or may not exist, but if the people who compile this at the state level for SAS could disaggregate the sixth grade numbers between school districts that keep an elementary school model through sixth or seventh grade
Oh.
versus the ones that start junior high school or middle school into sixth
Yeah,
grade.
actually, we can do that ourselves. The iReady platform that they have, or the what is it called on the state?
I4C, but we can.
No, the one that's the data analysis platform on NH, it's not I4C, they call it the I something or other, but
Yeah.
we can do
Oh,
that.
the one on the state website.
Yeah, it's on, yeah, you can go in and select the schools you want to compare yourself to, and you could select all of the
K-8
K-6,
schools.
6, whatever you want.
Yeah,
to
you
do.
could
Yep.
select K-8 schools
I mean,
as
if you just
opposed to
think,
middle
what's
school.
the biggest environmental variable that changes between fifth and sixth grade?
Right. But I do think it's definitely a conversation we need to have, is like, what is happening from fifth to sixth grade that's leading to this drop, that we do a pretty good job once we get here of recovering it, but you could argue you're losing ground only to gain it back, so that by the time kids are in high school, they're back on track, but there's something that has happened there. And figuring out what that is and how we can remedy that is absolutely one of the highest priorities we have.
Right.
Yeah, if we can address that, then looking at increases that occur during middle school, like, without the lost ground, those increases would be, like, you'd be like a significant percentage more proficient in schools.
Yeah.
Yep. So I'm gonna now move up to the high school. So the only data that I have for this year is the fall PSAT. They haven't released the school SAT data. That's why I want to come back to you again with all of the spring data. But I was able to extract for grades 10 and 11 in the fall, and again, comparison of Newmarket and then the state. And this is for reading. So our juniors scoring at 73% is really wonderful. I mean, I feel like that's a really nice celebration. And then their score is a 503. And again, this is the PSAT. So I'm excited to see the same group of students, their spring SAT data, to see how they fared there. And then the next slide is mathematics. And what you have here is, in terms of meeting benchmark, 37%, so it's about that third in 10th grade, and the same in 11th grade. And we're a little bit below the state for 11th grade compared to 10th grade.
So I happen to be at a place in my son's academic journey where I'm
Yes.
learning more about SATs and ACTs.
Oh, right.
Is there a reason we don't use ACTs other than historically, or is it the state?
Well, in terms of, so the SAT serves as like our state assessment, the way kids take it here.
Yeah.
Certainly, I just remember when my kids were younger, they're out of college now, but they did take the ACT, because I said, oh, you should probably take the ACT too.
Yeah.
So certainly kids can, we don't offer it here in this school, but they can certainly sign up for it. I don't know what high schools.
Yeah, typically,
I'm just more about the test itself.
The test
and
itself
how
is
the te-
measuring math,
it-
science.
Well, yeah, but how does that test compare? How accurate is the measurement of an ACT rather than an SAT, where there's perhaps more nuance
speak
Right.
about,
Well,
but if
the-
it's just only math and science, then
right, well,
you're not getting a full picture out of it. from that
It's
either.
not showing in these results, but the SAT, particularly since they've adopted it as the state assessment, there are all subcategory scores you can look at. So you can look at scientific reasoning, you can look at social, they call it social science logic or something to that effect. So there are subtests you can look at to analyze. Historically, the SAT has been the test that's been very prominent and dominant in the Northeast, and particularly around elite colleges. The ACT has been more popular in the West and South. And so like certainly kids that are thinking of applying to Stanford or someplace like that, they probably do want to take the ACT because that's something that might be more measurable. The ACT typically is a more specific achievement, subject area based, more along the lines of an AP exam, I would say, like that kind
It's
of
like
thing.
what you know in those four
Right.
areas.
Yeah.
It's another piece of data information. Students
Yeah.
certainly can't take it.
But in New Hampshire, SAT is the
Is
state assessment
in New England.
for,
Gotcha.
for,
That
for us.
explains it, yeah.
I mean, the tough thing about both of those tests is they're optional. I mean, they're self-selecting, so
Yeah.
Right.
there's a bias right off the bat, and
Yeah.
I mean, there's a bias. We're at, this is not, again, not pejorative against anyone, not, just like, only a third of our population is proficient. That is a concern. I know it's a concern to everyone, right? Like, it's one of the reasons I think it's one of our board goals that we're working on is that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think to that point, and again, this isn't to be disparaging, but how do we get to a point where every year it's not like, well, it's COVID, well, it's this, well, we've changed that, well, 15 kids moved out, well, is there ever a point we can get to where we're like more comfortable with the data to be able to say, yeah, this is a real accurate representation of what we're seeing, and it's not being changed or acted upon or, modified from some external factor that we're not accounting for. And I don't know if we can even get there. But.
Well, I would say one of the things that by not doing the SAS test in 2020, in a sense, it took away a baseline of comparative information, and it takes multiple years of doing it to get back into a cycle where the growth can be measured and talked about. And I do think we're just getting to a place where, with the SAS anyway, it's worth even talking about growth because there's so many variables that came into play during that window. The one advantage to the SAT and the PSAT is this is a standardized test that has gone on forever. And so you're not just comparing yourself to this year, it's like historical data. And so I think you can, with some level of certainty, know that at least for what it measures, it's an accurate measure of whatever we agree it measures. And it's consistent over time. That's not necessarily the case with the SAS as it's played out over the last 3 years.
Okay, and then my last slide, I just wanted to share with you where we headed. We want to become a school where we are looking at data regularly, and how does that inform our instruction? And through that is through collaboration, and really supporting a culture in both schools that is collaborative by nature. Because we know what the research tells us, and it tells us that schools with collaborative cultures actually produce greater student learning outcomes. But it also, Patty says, teachers are happier. When they're collaborating with their team or with their content area, they get excited about it. And it's helpful to share and write lessons together or, analyze student, like just local assessments together. And what does that look like? And what does that mean? And so that's really where we want to go with both of our schools and how we use data, but more importantly, but how we collaborate with each other for all of our students in Newmarket. And then I'm going to ask Andy to help me out to, we had just questions about the ranking.
Yeah, I actually want to give some kudos here. I mean, it's a ranking. I mean, I know congratulations on the high school being ranked the 10th best high school in the state. I think it's an exciting rank. In fact, Andy, Patty, and I joked. It's like, well, we scored. He came from Portsmouth. She came from Exeter. I came from Oyster River. We beat them all. And so it was quite an exciting day for. So it felt good. It felt good. But we thought because it has been out in the news, we thought it would be nice to spend a little time talking about it and kind of where it came from. So.
Yeah, so my phone, I'm sure like your emails blew up when that headline came out there and people from Portsmouth were, congratulations. It is a really, it's a really huge honor. Our photo company, Jessica's, reached out to us and is actually going to provide us with a banner that will, I have to pick a proof and display, demonstrating Newmarket High School, top 10 of the year, and year out there. It is a big deal. Kids are talking about it, staff are talking about it. I'm not one to go all in on a particular metric. This particular U.S. News World Report uses heavy AP scores as one of their driving metrics to create rankings. We're a small school. We're going to graduate 70 next year. You get 3 or 4 kids who take 1 or 2 AP tests. You can swing this data either way. The big push here, from my perspective, is we've got really strong, passionate kids, and we've got to continue to find ways to meet individualized needs. This is a super small school. I was doing interviews today for a counseling position, and 2 of the candidates asked, what's the one thing you want from this? And my answer, point blank, was we need to capitalize on our size. I came from a big district. These 2 candidates came from a big district. Said our 90-some-odd% of our kids are with us pre-K-12. They know each other's first name, last name, mom's name, address, everything. We need to capitalize on that and find ways to individualize our approach. So yeah, I'm really happy with the top 10 ranking, but I think it's just this first step in to really push into that. Okay, now how can we inspire you? What can we change? Because AP scores are not end all be all. They're nice. I'm happy with it. But I'd also like to demonstrate and take a look on your way out at the grad wall. We have kids going off to colleges. We also have kids joining professional neighborhood groups down in Boston. And finding ways to inspire those kids to come through the door every day is really important. And to make sure they continue to engage is something that we really, really value here. So I'm very happy with the banner. Once I pick a proof, we'll put it up. But overall, it's just a small step for us to continue to find ways to engage kids.
Now, Patty, I know you did some research just to kind of explain the ranking and sort of how it, what,
How are they ranked on? So there are 6 indicators, and then there are weights for each of those, and that's what determines the overall score for the rankings of schools. So one is college readiness. That's a 30%. So that's what Indy spoke of. It's a percentage of 12th graders. And all of this is from the class of 21-22. So it's wonderful that we none of us were here in 2020-22.
so our predecessors did great work.
That's the data of the
Oh, so
class
my
of
son.
students that determines this ranking. So they look at the percentage of, like I said, of 12th graders from the class of 21-22 who took at least 1 AP by the end of their senior year. And then equally important is who earned a qualifying score on at least one of those AP classes. And so it's a 3 or higher. And earning a qualifier score is weighted 3 times more than simply taking the exam. So the kids in that 21-22, yes, the AP, but also earning that qualifying score in the AP exam. And then, of course, the college curriculum breadth, that's a percentage of kids in the class of 21-22 who took a variety of AP courses across multiple disciplines. And then again, the percentage of those same students earning the qualifying score. It says that the qualifying score is weighted 3 times more than actually taking the exam. And then they talk about the state assessment proficiency, so that's our SAT. That's also our New Hampshire science score. So back in 21-22, that class, 44% proficient on the science SAS. And then they talk about the state assessment performance, and that's the difference between how kids performed on the state assessment and what U.S. News predicted based on a school's student body. That's 20%. And then our underserved student performance, that's 10%. And this is how well the student population receiving subsidized school lunch and Black and Hispanic populations perform in state assessments relative to the statewide performing among students not in those subgroups. And then lastly is the graduation rate. That's 10%. And so for the 2024 rankings, the graduation rate corresponds to the 2021 high school class graduation cohort who would have entered 9th grade in the 2017-18 school year.
So
We
you're-
collect all that data and then marking.
Yep.
So it's based on class of 22, you're saying?
Correct.
21, 22, yes. That's the
Okay.
class that it's based
I
on.
misunderstood at first,
Yeah.
that you're
I
saying
love
both
that
21 and
explanation.
22.
This might be a great topic for a video for the website.
There you go.
Is An explanation of
There
all
you go.
this.
Are you
to help
interested in
the
being in a
community.
video?
And if I could just add on, I was over at the high school yesterday talking with Jody Callan, and because she's in the heat of getting ready for AP exams that are happening this month, and there's a lot of kids taking AP exams. I think it's as much a reflection on the aspirations of our kids and our families, and I think it's really important that that's kind of what's driving this. That being said, we have a big pool of kids doing AP exams coming right up, And actually, if you go back, this was based on the 21, 22. Next year's rankings will be based on 22, 23, which we can all claim credit for. By the,
No pressure to the kids.
But just taking a quick look at that group, there's similar level of participation and performance. So so it's kind of exciting. As Andy points out, in a small school environment, at any time, you can just have a class that either does or doesn't necessarily engage with those kind of measures, and things can change. But because we're a small school, it can also go up really fast too. And I think that's what we're seeing is a really heavy participation rate. Did you want to add something, Andy?
I want to call out to, under the guise of student achievement, just two particular students. Talked about this a little bit last time, but just one more plug for the great work from Ryan Isaac, our senior at SST, who finished first statewide. He's amped up ready to go to Skills USA in June down in Atlanta. And I had a conversation with the young lady and said, I'm sorry, I'm not great at checking the old school snail mail. Sometime over April break, I got an actual piece of mail from the U.S. Department of Ed notifying me that our senior Acadia Bloodlane is one of 625 students nationwide for a semifinalist for the U.S. Presidential Scholar Competition. That's a really, really big honor. The pool starts at about 5,000 and gets whittled down every 3 weeks. We're expecting a nomination from the U.S. Department of Ed and their secretary end to mid to late May for what ends up being about 170 kids nationwide under this honor. Katie was blown away with it. She's a phenomenal woman who's dressed is still in the library. She's heavy into fashion, going off to fashion design next year. There's also a really, really great kid she performed in Clue for us this year. And just wanted to make you aware of that. And last but not least, I will not tell you who, but we announced our top 10. I'll leave you in suspense because they are coming to your next board meeting the 17th, 16th? 16th, sorry. And we are very, very excited for that group of scholars as well. In the guise of student achievement, you got hardcore data, you got qualitative stuff here.
I do want to echo what you said about the wall out there. It's worth taking a minute to just look at the choices kids are making. As kids are deciding where to go, they go out and add their decal to the wall. It's pretty cool.
So the wall is a bit of a steal from some other places I've done, but really, in terms of stuff that was happening here pre-COVID, I can tell you that I just signed a grant today for NCEP, where ideally that's kind of the short-term Band-Aid solution. What I'd really like to do is find a really good Newmarket picture, something that really represents Newmarket, and put it up on that drywall space. It's about 8 by 13 and a half, and stretch it out and have them adhere to the wall and make it a where you're going wall type of situation. Permanent mural when it's not graduation season, but as kids make the decision to use the red capping out and have them go plastered up there. It's really a cool thing. Kids really get into it, taking selfies with it. So that's kind of our Band-Aid. Maya Settler and I really worked on that. She's done a ton of work on that, but that's for this year. Going forward, we really like to plaster essentially a billboard up there that is Newmarket and let kids really tack their aspirations on. So that's the plan for that going forward.
Nice.
I absolutely love it. And if the kids take nothing else away from this U.S. News and World Report thing than just the fact that this isn't about us. It's only about the faculty to the extent that they're led by the kids' passions to do the thing. I mean, this is about them. This is about the choices they've made along the way and the achievement that they've made. So I hope they take, and not just the ones who are seniors and juniors, but the others come, they can own this for as long as they choose to own this.
I would also add, I think we have a community of families that have high aspirations for their children, and I think that sets a tone, and I think it gives us a lot to work with. So, the strength that the Newmarket school system has is our smallness, because we can personalize things, and I think while APs is just one small piece of it, the ability to provide that to kids in a way that allows them to show themselves in a positive way, that's just one example of how we can do that. Awesome, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
always informative and enjoyable. Next up, we are fortunate enough to have Superintendent Todd Allen here
And I'm going to go to the,
present the board docs agenda
and I'm
system.
going to keep this short, I promise, because I'm hoping this will work. Oh, there we go, that's okay. Come on. There we go. Actually, I just wanted to take a minute to share with you the new board docs policy manual we have, but also just pose a couple of thoughts to you as things to think about as we kind of move forward. When we were meeting about the goals, we had the workshop, we were talking about wanting to do things to make board meetings more interactive and get people to be able to follow along. And I think this is a tool that we now have, which is wonderful for policies, which I'll show you here real quick, because this is the thing that drew me into it. I got very excited, and Phil will appreciate this because he's a policy geek like me too. But if any of you have any knowledge of our old policy site, you may remember when we went in, you'd pick a policy, and if you wanted to look at the two policies at the same time, you had to wait 30 seconds for it to load and so forth. So I want to just show you how wonderful this new site is for this. So let's just, I'm going to open it up, and let's say we want to know about volunteer involvement policy. There you go. We open it right up. There it is. I don't want to look at that one. I want to look at a different one. Boom, there it is. I want to look at a different one. So the point is, it loads very quickly, and it actually really works well for policy use. And this, by the way, is a platform that many school districts are adopting because it's consistent and it allows us to have easy access to policies. So that was the reason that we kind of bought into this board docs. But there are potentials that we could consider as a board if we want to. And I wanted to just share with you a couple of things here. Hold on. One of the things we could do, which right now, obviously you know how we do our agendas. We have, on our website, you have a link that says agenda, it's a PDF document, and then there's another PDF that is our backup materials. And so I know from just talking with board members that at times it can get very frustrating kind of going back and forth. Like I can't remember how many times somebody has getting frustrated trying to find the right document when we're talking about a particular issue. One of the things we could do if we wanted to adopt this as our agenda format is that it creates, you can create the agenda in here. So for example, if let's say we're down here, we're talking about school board self-evaluation. This, by the way, was the March 7th meeting. We just put it in as a template. You're on that discussion, and okay, you just want to see what were our goals from last year. You can open it up and you can look at it, but you can also, you can keep the agenda open on the right, and you have the documents on the, on the left, and you have the documents on the right. So it's a tool that could be something we could use. Patty Banfield and I have talked a lot about it, but it might be something worth talking about as a board if you find this to be a more useful setup. The other thing that this would allow us to do is there is an ability with any document to, and I'm going to open this one just to kind of show you, to do what's called an executive access. There you go. You can see at the bottom executive content. What that is that each board member could be given their own login. And then if there were documents that we only wanted you to see that weren't public documents, they would go there and you would have access to it and you could see it. So for example, the letter we will talk about in non-public that I gave you earlier, that would be something that could be here. So we wouldn't have to have paper copies of it. But what it does is it allows us to do that. The other thing is it allows us, and I'm going to go back to the welcome page, it also would allow us to have all of our agendas and minutes in the same place. Right now, when I click on this, it just brings us to our current page.
Yeah.
But if you can imagine that we would then have immediate access to an archives of all of our documents. So I wanted to share that with you, not because you have to decide anything tonight, but I wanted you to realize that we have some potential here. And as we're talking about improving communication, one of the things that I think this does, if we used it for agendas, is it just makes it easier to follow along in a board meeting, to know what's going on. And it would be beneficial to you as board members, but it also might be beneficial to community members, because currently we have a long PDF that someone has to scroll through, and it isn't necessarily obvious which document refers to which topic. So anyway, just something to think of. I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
And we end up doing scans of PDFs into a master PDF that then you can't even search. So yeah, if we can just upload individual documents as they're in their original format.
And actually, I forgot to mention, you can search in this as well. So you could search, like if you, in the policy manual, you want to find out every reference to dogs, you could go in and search it, and it'll give you every policy that does that. And you do the same thing with the agenda. If there's a topic you want, you can search it. So yeah, that would be.
But it's within the document too that I find
Exactly, yeah.
frustrating.
Yep.
Sometimes you're like, oh, I know we talked about this in the minutes.
Yep. Dan?
I don't know whether you know I mean, from a technological standpoint, is it possible to embed this within our website or iframe it? Or, my first concern, I guess, is it's one more URL that people have to be cognizant of. So
Link it. At least link it.
Well, I mean, if you,
Yeah, you link it, right?
link it gets you a certain way, but if you could just like iframe embed it, then it would be a
yeah, again, this is a platform that schools all over the country are now using.
Okay.
It is, so I'm not as technically savvy as you or Jason Carey, but I'm sure there are things we can do to make it work better. But just to kind of go back, so this is like right now, if you go to our school board, scroll down, you go up here under school board and you see policies. You click on it, it brings you to this page, and then you can click on go to policies, and that brings you right to the board docs document. And so I'm assuming that we could easily do something very similar to that. And then if you are a person who's a board member, you go up here and you can log in with a personal login account, and obviously only the people who have that would access the executive documents and that kind of stuff.
No, I mean, the benefits are obvious and huge.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering how tightly we can integrate it to make it, it just makes it that much easier for people to access. Thank you.
Yeah, but it's something to be
Would
aware
this
of.
be a time savings or a time
Well,
drain?
I think the thing that I would like to see it correct the most is, like, for example, Patty discovered an issue with the document that needed to be fixed. The fix for that this afternoon is for
I
us
didn't
to
see
come around and
anything
give
wrong
everybody
with any
a
of her
paper
documents.
copy. And almost every meeting, one of the documents, there's something that needs to be corrected. And what could happen is anybody who has administrative privileges can just go in and upload new documents, and then everybody's looking at the same thing. And it does,
And then Patty doesn't have to keep sending out
Correct.
emails saying, here's the corrected version.
because it automatically is repopulated, and everybody knows that's where you go to get it. So what I have theorized with Patty Banfield is using, if it was something the board was interested in, and again, we don't have to decide it right this minute, maybe after July, starting with the new year, shift over to this as our model.
One thing that I do appreciate about the current system, not the PDF, that is that the agenda is set separately. So if I just want to take a quick look at, like, before I'm reviewing the packet, like, oh, hey, what's in there? It's a PDF. Like, if we can continue that and then, like, have this as where all the materials live, that would feel very helpful.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Or for the public, because then they just have to look at the agenda as opposed to digging into it.
Right, and then the agenda is tied to all the documents, yeah. Yeah, that would be an easy thing to do, yep. And that's all I have to say about that.
No, it's fantastic. Does anyone, do we want to wait to discuss this further? Or, I mean, I think it's a great idea, and something worth trying, certainly.
Yeah.
Give it a shot.
Okay, so I will work with Patty Banfield to
All right.
get this up and running for our first meeting in July. So it'd be like July 11th would be the first time we'd use it. What that might mean is we need to just make sure everybody has good technology to access it through. So as long as you have a computer in front of you, obviously that's when it works the best. But if you're using a phone or if you're using an iPad, we just need to make sure that you have what you need. I did check it on my phone, and it's very small, but it's all readable. So I assume it works pretty well on an iPad as well.
Great, thank you. All right, heading right into discussion items. Does anyone have any correspondence? I do have one item I think we all got, and that was from Michael Woods telling us that his son Matthew Woods has actually achieved his Eagle Scout, which is pretty amazing. And
We got that?
you
Did we
didn't
get it? No,
Oh, did you all not get it? I thought
I didn't get anything.
I will forward it to you. And just so that you folks know, I did respond and invited him to a future meeting should they have time. Anyone else have any correspondence? Nope. All right, next up, we have the budget process. We talked about adding some items to the next few agendas to discuss the budgeting process and help get us in frame of mind to make an informed decision. And while Todd and I were forming the agenda, I thought it might be useful to maybe take a few minutes to discuss not only some of the budgeting stuff, but maybe, Lonnie, for your sake, and for those of us who are new on the board, or at least newly elected, just to kind of understand how the tax rates are affected by the budget and property valuations and that sort of stuff.
Want me to dive in?
Sure.
Okay, so there are 3 documents in your board packet. The first one is enrollments, and I just wanted to give you a sense of kind of where we're at enrollment-wise. Just to remind you, in October, NESDEC gives us an updated enrollment projection, so I will have that prior to budget development, but I think what you have in front of you through 2023, I pulled it from the current budget narrative that's on our website, but then I updated the FY '24 and '25 numbers based upon what I affectionately call butts in seats, how many students are actually physically present in our building as at this time. So the column for FY '24 reflects there are a total of 1,006 students from pre-K through post-high school currently enrolled in Newmarket, and you can see 493 at the elementary, 230 at the middle school level, 283 at the high school. That reflects an increase of 36 over last year. When we built the budget for next year, for 24, 25, we were working from the 23 and 24 numbers, and at that point, 24 was still an estimated number. To give you an idea of where we're starting to think for next year, I worked with Andy and Sean to kind of see if these numbers seem to make sense. Really, the place where we notice the biggest fluidity in numbers is in pre-K, obviously, because in many cases they haven't materialized yet in our schools, so it's hard for us to know. But I would point out that we opened this year with 33 kids in pre-K, and it's now up to 43. So it's definitely a growing level. So we had previously projected 39 students for next year, so we just, with 43 this year, we went with the number 40. Currently, the kindergarten numbers is another area where it can be challenging because not all kids are in our preschool program, so they're not necessarily identified to us. It is of note that this year we have 84 kids in kindergarten that are with us, and we're projecting conservatively a 75 number. What you'll see, it's an interesting pattern over the last 4 or 5 years is in kindergarten, it goes up, down, up, down, up. So we're kind of hedging our bets, thinking it might not drop as much, but anyway, that gives you an idea there. The other place where it's often hard to project is 8th to 9th grade, just because kids can make different decisions about high school. And you can certainly notice that we've had years where the jump from 8th grade to 9th grade has shown, 2, 3, 4, 5 kids, depending, go to private school. So what we did here was simply move up the freshman class. So clearly there is potential that the freshman class could be smaller or larger, depending on how you look at it, for next year. But right now, we're projecting our numbers for 24, 25 to be pretty close to where they are this year. So we're not going to see a major decline. You will notice when you look at the NESDEC projections, they are generally projecting a decline to continue, and probably that will be the case. But at least for now, I think we're in a bit of an aberrational period that we're not seeing that pattern continue. So that's the enrollment numbers. Any thoughts, questions about it? Dan?
What's the actual capacity of the pre-K program? Like, what would we consider full?
The current program has a morning and afternoon session with 2 teachers. So typically, we're talking, 12 to 14 max in each session. So we're looking at, 48 to 56, maybe max, keeping in mind that the pre-K program is primarily a special education-based program, and then there are mentor students that can be brought in, and there are very strict percentages that can be. So the capacity is more dictated by how many students you have that have been identified through Child Find. So that's why oftentimes we open with a small number, and then as we identify more kids, they show up in our doors.
Yeah, and that was going to be my next question. I know it's not just generally open to everyone, correct?
Well, basically, if you are a non-special education student, you can be on a wait list, and then when the slots, because we do have, and I don't know off the top of my head exactly how many, but I want to say it's a 50-50 split. So there are slots available for what they call mentor students that are non-identified students. So typically what is happening is there's people on a wait list, and when there's a slot available for a mentor student, we reach out to them and add them. Most of the students that have been added, though, are students that have been identified through the referral process.
Are all pre-K programs like that?
Unless you have, and this is something certainly I would throw it as something for consideration. In fact, I was talking with our pre-K teachers this morning. There are schools that have universal pre-K. I mean, the funding mechanisms that are available through are really IDEA based. So that's where you're getting grant money. If, however, we wanted to expand to be a universal program, we'd have to decide how we could pay for that locally.
Right.
I would say, just as something to think about, one of the advantages that Newmarket does have is it's a small school setting. If our numbers do decline the way NESDEC is projecting in the upper grade levels, it might free up capacity to say, maybe at some point we ask ourselves, do we want to have a universal pre-K program? And I would tell you, the pre-K teachers would be on board with that if that was something you wanted to do, because they definitely see the need. We're seeing an increase in kids arriving in our schools that have social regulation issues and things like that, and not necessarily special education issues, but they're just not having the opportunity to be in that setting. And so the more you can get in, the better your results are going to be early on. So that's the enrollment numbers. The second chart that I handed to you is just the staffing plan. And again, this is straight out of the budget narrative. I just wanted to kind of remind you of sort of our staffing plan. And Andy reminded me very quickly that this is actually not accurate even as of today. Because remember, when we built our budget, we promised you that we would reduce by 1 FTE, which we are in the process of doing keep in mind, with the attrition that we've had for retirements and so forth. But we're also very carefully evaluating each position as it comes up. So for the 24-25 budget, we built it with the idea that we reduced by 2.44 FTE district-wide. We're hopeful that we'll deliver on a higher number than that heading into next year, which will obviously help us as we build the following year's budget. But I do want to just emphasize that it is a challenging thing to do, but every time we have an opening, and I look at Andy because they seem to all be in his building, we take a very careful look at what is needed, and obviously, as I've said to you many times, if it's a position needed as it's currently constituted, we obviously advertise for it and hire. If we don't need it as currently constituted, the next thing we do is we ask ourselves, is there another need that we have that we need to address? And if the answer to both those questions is no, we don't need the position as constituted, and no, there isn't another pressing need, then we choose not to fill it, and we're trying to carefully do that as we go. So anyway, that's the current status, and I would just remind you, last year, heading into the 23-24, I want to remind you that we reduced by 7.35 FTE. So over 2 years, we've reduced by almost 10, like 9.69 FTE. So just keep that in mind. And the reason why I'm emphasizing this is when we start talking budgets, the reality is the vast majority of the money in a school budget is people. And so if a target is being asked to be hit in terms of a financial target, if we're going to need to reduce, that's that's the place where the money is. We're not gonna save very much by cutting back on paper clips and markers. So anyway.
Todd, on the health aides, that's based on the needs of the current
Correct.
students, right?
Yeah, and actually, those 2 health aides were created, and we offset it. We had a full-time nurse that was providing services to a child, and we discovered that it was actually a more cost-effective mechanism in working through the family and so forth. We were able to do a different model. And actually, those 2 health aides work with particular students this is specific to the elementary school, but they also provide support in the nurses' offices. So anyway, so that's the staffing, just so you know that. And then the last thing I wanted to share with you is just some historical perspective. You know, Gary and I were talking, one of the great things about Newmarket right now is we're a $1 billion valuation town. So from a mathematical standpoint, it makes it really easy. Because when you're in a $1 billion town and the way our valuations are currently going, for every $100,000 of money in your budget, it's the equivalent of basically 10 cents on the 1,000 to the property tax. So if you say to yourself, we want to reduce by $100,000, what you're really saying, the average homeowner is property value is in the $450,000 range. Currently, you're saying $100,000 reduction in the budget is a difference of $45-ish on the tax rate to a family. What I provided, this chart is straight off the Newmarket website. It's just kind of giving you our tax history. The pie chart at the bottom shows you 67% is local education cost. That's historic for the 23. And then the state education tax is another 7%. So when you're thinking about the Newmarket tax rate, 74% of that is the school funding. So you can certainly see why, as a community, people would focus on that, because that's where the biggest impact for their taxes is. So anyway, Gary, is there anything that you wanted to?
Nope. I just thought it was useful to understand that. There's probably a reevaluation coming up, or we know there is, actually.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, we have no idea what that will mean.
It's going to make the math harder.
Yes,
If
probably.
nothing If nothing else.
They're not thinking about the convenience of the math when they do that. They're thinking about property values.
Yeah.
But I'll lobby them to try to keep the numbers nice and simple and round
If you
for us.
could, that would be things I had going for me. No, that was it. Is there any other things you can think of for?
No, I just think all of those are variables that we have to be cognizant of as we go forward. And actually, at some point, is it the next meeting, Andy? Yeah, Andy just loves being here so much. He's going to be back to talk more specifically about staffing at the junior, senior high, and certainly giving you some sense of ratios and all that kind of stuff.
Great. Last item for discussion is the school board goals. I've been given on good authority that there's emails swirling around discussing a consolidated goals document. So we can, unless anyone has any thoughts on that, we can postpone discussion on that until next meeting. And that brings us up to some generous donations. So we have 4 donations from the NCEP, one for $750 for a track and field trip to Chinatown of Boston. We have $750 for Newmarket Elementary School, kindergarten, wing sensory path, whatever that is. It'd be interesting to find out.
If you have a chance to go to the elementary school down by the kindergarten wing, there's a whole sensory, they call it a sensory path, but there are different activities kids can do. And if you, it's a hoot to just stand there and watch kids doing it. There's like different, it's almost like a hopscotch board, that kind of thing, but it's giving kids things to do that kind of focus their bodies and makes them, helps them make the transition, if you will.
And I suppose it's not kindergarten. It's not some play
No,
on
it's not
words. I should, okay.
No, it's kinder, no, we haven't changed the name.
Okay.
That's a misspelling.
The materials, I don't think that's the right name, but
Probably not.
maybe right in the agenda.
We have $560 to the elementary school again for 3rd grade minimal book supply. $729.21. Preschool STEM and science materials, which is great. And $500 from the Exeter Running Club for the middle school cross-country team.
I did want to just give a shout out to Jen Dolph, who is the middle school running coach, and she's a member of the Exeter Running Club, and the Exeter Running Club made the donation to honor her for her efforts here, so it was nice.
Great. Well, thank you all very much for those generous donations. Next up, we open the floor at 6:40 for public comment. Not seeing members of the public here yet. Close the floor at 6:40 and hope for next meeting. And with that, we'll head right into our action items. Seek a motion to approve the April 19th public and non-public sealed minutes.
19th or 18th?
18th, which is what it says, and I didn't. The 18th, thank you.
So moved.
Second.
Correction and motion by Dan Smith. Second by Phil Nazaro. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
We have a manifest floating about. Who won that lottery?
Move, we approve the manifest in the amount of $1,111,228.38. A lot of ones.
So moved.
We have a motion on the table by Phil. We have a second by Amy Tilton. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Next up, we have a couple items we need to make a decision on, one of which is to approve the courtyard project and determine how we are going to fund it. Does anyone want to make a motion on that or discuss it further?
I move to approve the courtyard project using impact fees.
Said very definitively, confidently. Have a
If
second?
that is truly what I mean.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Dan Smith, any other discussion on that? Everybody comfortable with that? All those in favor, say aye.
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 All right, look at that, a decision was made.
Just to be clear, that was decided to use impact fees to pay for the courtyard project.
That
right?
was decided, yes. Seek a motion to approve using the remaining bond funds for the 24-25 fiscal year, 24-25 fiscal year, pay down the bond.
Can be careful how you word that. We're going to pay
Thank you.
part of the bond payment for that. We can't pay down the principal.
No, well, is that the entire bond payment, or that's only a portion of it, right?
The total bond payment is 2.1.
Very small.
Oh, that's right.
2.1 million.
So we're almost there.
I
We're almost
was gonna
there.
say.
Yeah,
Towards the bond payment.
So, it'd be like 10% of a bond payment.
Yeah.
But then ultimately, we'll have more money in the fund at the
Yeah.
end of the year, correct? Which would go back, you said, to tax. Right.
Never advocate for anything less.
Right.
Such a sound strategy and guaranteed funding anything.
2.1 million, I don't have anything in my brain kicking around for that. Does anyone
So moved.
like to move that? Thank you. Phil, move the second.
Second.
Motion by Phil, second by Amy. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thumbs up. Let's see. Let's skip the goals, and we have personnel matter, which we will vote on to going to non-public, so
Do we want to, you had on here sealing the April 18th non-public minutes?
I did that as part of the public. I did it together.
Okay.
I did it quick like. Did anyone not, did we not hear that? I can do it.
No, you said approve the CLA.
Oh, okay.
Okay, good.
All right, good. All right, so we'll seek a motion to go into non-public pursuant to RSA 91A3C, to discuss personnel matter.
Second.
Motion by Phil, second by Dan. A roll call vote, Amy Tilton,
Aye.
Gary Swanson, aye, Dan Smith,
Aye.
Phil Nazaro,
Aye.
Molly Stebbins. With that, we are in non-public at 6:45 PM. We will not be returning on the air.
Oh, yeah, yeah.